I told them 6 times I was moving to Arizona. No one looked up from their phones. They forgot because I was convenient to forget. 10 months later, they called screaming, asking why I never told them. That was when I realized they had not been missing me. They had been missing what they could get from me. The second I stopped being reachable, someone tried to use my old life like it still belonged to them. My name is Hazel Gomez. The phone call that finally severed the last thread of my patience happened on a Tuesday afternoon. The sun was blazing outside my office window in Phoenix, casting long, sharp shadows across my desk. But in my ear, the weather was stormy. It was my mother. She was not calling to ask how I was. She was calling to scream. The volume was so loud, I actually had to pull the phone away from my ear. I could hear the tinny distortion of her voice bouncing off the glass walls of the conference room. She was furious because I had missed the bi-weekly family potluck. Apparently, Aunt Rosa had made her famous mole, and my absence was not just a vacancy at the table, it was, in her words, a personal attack on the family unit. "You are so selfish. Hazel," she shouted, "you just disappear. You do not answer texts. You do not show up to help set up. Your father had to carry the folding chairs by himself. Do you have any idea how embarrassing it is when people ask where my daughter is, and I have to tell them I do not know?" I sat there, staring at a cactus on the windowsill. I let her run out of breath. I let the silence stretch out, heavy and uncomfortable, until I could hear her breathing on the other end. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice terrifyingly level, "when you say I disappeared, I need to clarify something. Which state do you think I disappeared from?" There was a pause. It was not a pause of realization. It was the pause of someone buffering, trying to figure out why the script had changed. "What are you talking about?" she snapped. "I am talking about the fact that I live in Arizona." I said, "I have lived in Arizona for 10 months. I cannot carry folding chairs for Dad because I am 800 miles away." The silence that followed that statement was different. It was the sound of a woman realizing she had absolutely no idea where her child was. Not because the child was hiding, but because the mother had never bothered to look. For 32 years, I was the furniture. I was the beige paint on the walls of the Gomez household. I was essential for structural integrity. But nobody ever stopped to admire me. I was the reliable one, the one who remembered that Uncle Tino was diabetic and needed the sugar-free cake, the one who drove everyone to the airport, but never had anyone waiting for her at arrivals. I was the background noise of their lives, a constant hum that they only noticed when it stopped. It is funny how invisibility works. It is not like the movies where you fade away. It is much more painful than that. You are right there, in high definition, but people look right through you to see what they want. I remember when I landed the interview for the senior compliance officer position. It was the biggest jump in my career. I told them at breakfast. I told them the date. I told them the time. When I came home that evening, beaming, ready to share the news that I had crushed it, my sister shoved a bag of dry cleaning into my hands and asked if I could drop it off tomorrow morning because she had a yoga retreat. No one asked how the interview went. 2 days later, my dad asked me if I was still working at the bookstore. I had not worked at the bookstore since I was 22. They did not forget because they were malicious. That would almost be easier to accept. Villains are interesting. My family was not villainous. They were just self-absorbed. They forgot because I was convenient to forget. Remembering me required effort. Using me required nothing. The breaking point came in the form of a job offer from a company called Stratus Solutions. It sounded fancy. The kind of vague corporate entity that manages data clouds or optimizes synergies. It was a good job, a great job, and it was in Phoenix, Arizona. I accepted the offer on a Monday. I spent the week packing my life into cardboard boxes, feeling a mix of terror and exhilaration. I was finally doing it. I was writing myself out of their background and into my own foreground. I decided to tell them at Sunday dinner. This was the holy grail of family time. The one time everyone was supposedly present. I cooked. Of course I cooked. I made 3 trays of enchiladas because my brother eats like a linebacker. I waited for a lull in the conversation. which was mostly my sister talking about her new boyfriend's startup and my dad complaining about the neighbor's fence. I have some news, I said. The chewing continued. My brother was scrolling through Instagram with one hand, shoveling forkfuls of cheese and tortilla into his mouth with the other. My mom was texting Aunt Rosa. I got a job, I said, a little louder. Mm-hmm. My mom hummed, not looking up. That is nice. Mija, did you remember to buy the limes? I am moving, I said, to Arizona. Next month. I looked around the table. I waited for the fork to drop. I waited for the head to snap up. I waited for someone, anyone, to ask, Arizona? Why? When? Are you scared? Are you excited? My dad reached across the table. Pass the salsa, he said. My sister looked up from her phone for exactly 1 second. Arizona is hot, she said, and then immediately looked back down to type a reply. That was it. That was the moment. The grand announcement of my departure. The seismic shift in my universe was met with a request for condiments and a weather report. I sat there and watched them. I watched them eat the food I cooked, in the house I helped clean, wearing clothes I had probably helped pick out. I realized then that I could vanish right there at the dining table. And they would probably just complain about the air feeling heavy, I told myself. Maybe next time they'll notice. Maybe when the boxes appear in the hallway. Maybe when I start selling my furniture. But I smiled to myself. A bitter, sharp thing that felt like forcing down gravel. I had been saying maybe next time for my entire life. I stopped trying after that dinner. I didn't make a scene. I didn't tip the table. I just stopped broadcasting. I became exactly what they treated me as. A ghost. I packed my car. I signed the lease on a studio apartment in downtown Phoenix that smelled like fresh paint and freedom. I drove away early on a Tuesday morning while the house was still asleep. I thought that was the end of it. I thought the tragedy was that they did not care enough to notice I was gone. I thought my punishment was their indifference. But as I sat in my office in Phoenix, holding the phone away from my ear while my mother hyperventilated about folding chairs, I realized I was wrong. Indifference is passive. What was happening now was active, because as I looked down at my desk, at the credit monitoring alert I had opened just before she called, I realized something that made my blood run cold. They had not just forgotten me. Someone had realized that a forgotten person is a very useful thing. When you are invisible, nobody notices when someone else starts wearing your life like a costume, and while I was busy building a new future in the desert, someone back home had been very busy resurrecting my past. The second time I told them, I made sure there were no enchiladas to distract anyone. It was 3 days after the Sunday dinner announcement, during a casual drop-by at my parents' house to pick up some mail. My sister was there, painting her nails on the coffee table, and my mom was folding laundry while watching a soap opera. I stood in front of the television, blocking the view of the dramatic confrontation between the villainous and the amnesiac lover. I start work on October 14th. I said, I am driving out on the 10th. That gives me 4 days to settle in. My mom leaned to the left to see past my hip. You are blocking the screen. Hazel, she said, did you hear me? I asked. October 10th. I am taking the northern route. My sister blew on her wet nails. You should take the southern route, she said without looking up. It is prettier. Are you going to be back for Halloween? Leo wants to have a party. I stared at her. I am moving. I said, to Arizona. It is a 12-hour drive. I am not driving back 2 weeks later for a party. Oh, she said. Well, if you change your mind, bring ice. She did not ask where I was living. She did not ask about the job title. She asked for ice. The third time was with my dad. I thought maybe the women in the family were just too preoccupied with social logistics, so I cornered him in the garage. He was organizing his fishing tackle, a ritual he performed with religious solemnity despite not having gone fishing in 3 years. I helped him untangle a line. It was quiet, the smell of oil and sawdust hanging in the air. It felt intimate, the kind of setting where real conversations happen in movies. Dad, I said, I put the deposit down on the apartment in Phoenix. It is on the 3rd floor. No elevator. Going to be a workout moving the couch. He hummed, testing the tension of the reel. Make sure you lift with your knees, he said. You do not want a bad back like your uncle. I waited. I waited for him to ask for the address. I waited for him to say he would miss me. I am leaving the spare key under the mat when I go. I said, okay, mija, he said. Hey, remind your brother to bring my drill back. He has had it for 6 months. He was already mentally moving on to the next task, the next person. I was just a conduit for a message to his son. I was not the protagonist of the scene. I was the NPC giving a quest update. The 4th attempt was digital. I decided that perhaps verbal communication was the problem. Maybe they needed something they could see. I opened our family group chat, titled Gomez Fam Bam, a name my sister had chosen and which I secretly loathed. I typed out a message, just a reminder. I am moving to Phoenix next week. My last day in town is Tuesday. Let me know if anyone wants to grab coffee before I go. I hit send. The bubble turned blue, read by everyone. 12 seconds later, my brother sent a video of a cat falling off a ceiling fan. My sister replied with 3 laughing emojis. My dad sent a thumbs up sticker, but I am 90% sure it was in response to the cat, not my departure. My message scrolled up and away, buried under a deluge of internet debris. No one reacted to the text. No one heart reacted it. It was as if I had typed it in invisible ink. The 5th time, I got strategic. My mother often complained that the group chat moved too fast and that she missed things. She claimed she preferred email for important matters because she could read it on her iPad with her reading glasses on. So, I drafted an email. Subject: Moving Logistics/Emergency Contact Info/New Address. I attached a document with my new address in Phoenix, my work number, my landlord's name, and the dates of my travel. It was comprehensive. It was professional. It was impossible to misunderstand. I hit send at 9 in the morning. At 2 in the afternoon, I received a reply from her. Hazel, do you know the password for the Netflix account? Your father logged us out. I stared at the screen until the pixels started to blur. She had hit reply. That meant she had opened the email. She had seen the subject line. She had ignored the content entirely to ask for a password I had written on a sticky note and put on their fridge 4 years ago. The 6th time was the final straw. It was the night before I left. My car was packed. My room at their house, where I had stayed for a few weeks between leases, was stripped bare. The walls were empty. The closet was open and void. I called the house line. Mom, I said, I am leaving tomorrow morning at 5. I probably will not stop by to say goodbye because it is so early. Oh, okay, she said. Her voice was distracted, the sound of pots clanging in the background. I am driving alone, I said. It is going to take 2 days. Make sure you drink water, she said. You get headaches when you are dehydrated. And do not forget to pick up the milk on your way over Sunday. I gripped the phone. Mom, I said, I am not coming over Sunday. I will be in Arizona. Right, she said. Well, drive safe. Love you. She hung up. I stood there in the silence of my empty room. I looked at the phone in my hand. Then, I opened my laptop. I work in compliance. My entire professional life is built on the concept that if it is not documented, it did not happen. I track risk. I manage audits. I ensure that when things go wrong, there is a clear, undeniable trail showing exactly who dropped the ball. I created a new folder on my hard drive. I named it the Arizona Exit. Inside, I placed a screenshot of the group chat with the cat video bearing my announcement. I saved a PDF of the email I sent my mother, along with a timestamp of her reply about the Netflix password. I noted the date and duration of the phone calls in a spreadsheet. I even took a photo of the calendar in my parents' kitchen where I had written Hazel Moving Day in bright red marker on the 10th. I did not do this because I wanted to sue them. I did not do it because I wanted to hurt them. I did it because I knew them. I knew that in 6 months, or a year, or whenever they finally looked up and realized I was not there to fix the Wi-Fi or mediate a dispute, they would rewrite history, They would claim I abandoned them. They would say I snuck away in the night like a thief. They would paint themselves as the victims of a cold, ungrateful daughter. Gaslighting is not always a conscious plot. Sometimes it is just a defense mechanism for people who cannot bear to admit they simply did not care enough to listen. I needed the proof for myself. I needed to know that I was not crazy. I needed to look at those files and remind myself that I had tried. I had screamed into the void, and the void had asked for a password. I stood in the center of the room, the moonlight cutting across the floorboards. I felt a profound, aching hollowness in my chest. It was not the sadness of leaving. It was the crushing weight of a question that had been forming in the back of my mind for years. If I actually disappeared tomorrow, if my car went off a cliff in New Mexico and I vanished from the face of the earth, how long would it take them to realize I was not just late for dinner? I suspected the answer was measured not in hours, but in missed favors. They would notice I was gone only when they reached for me and found nothing but air. The morning I actually drove away was anticlimactic. There was no cinematic goodbye. No one ran out to the driveway in their pajamas to wave until my car was a speck on the horizon. My father was in the yard, watering the hydrangeas. He looked at my fully loaded sedan, tapped the roof twice with the flat of his hand, and told me to watch out for hydroplaning because the forecast called for rain in 3 states. That was it. That was the benediction I received for uprooting my entire existence. Watch out for puddles. I drove for 2 days. I listened to 12 hours of podcasts and drank enough bad gas station coffee to vibrate through the steering wheel. But the further I got from the humid, clinging air of my hometown, the lighter my chest felt. By the time I crossed the state line into Arizona, the landscape had stripped itself bare. The green clutter of the East Coast gave way to vast, open red earth and sky that looked too big to be real. Phoenix was a shock to the system, but a good one. It was 105 degrees when I pulled up to my new apartment complex, but it was a dry heat, the kind that evaporates the sweat off your skin before you even know you are perspiring. My apartment was small. It was a 1-bedroom on the 2nd floor with a balcony that overlooked a parking lot and a row of palm trees. But it was mine. I paid the rent. I chose the throw pillows. I decided where the spoons went in the drawer. For the first few weeks, I felt like a diver coming up for air. I had spent 30 years holding my breath, waiting for permission to exhale, and suddenly, I could breathe. The silence in my apartment was not the heavy, loaded silence of my parents' house, where quiet meant someone was angry or ignoring you. This silence was clean. It was empty space waiting to be filled. I threw myself into the newness of it all, at Strata Solutions. I was not Hazel the invisible daughter or Hazel the doormat. I was Hazel Gomez, the senior compliance officer who knew how to navigate complex regulatory frameworks. My colleagues invited me to happy hour on my 3rd day. We went to a place with string lights on the patio and margaritas the size of fish bowls. A woman named Sarah, who worked in HR, asked me about my hobbies. She actually waited for the answer when I told her I liked hiking. She did not interrupt me to talk about her yoga class. Instead, she invited me to join a group that hiked Camelback Mountain on Saturday mornings. I went, my lungs burned, and my legs felt like jelly. But standing at the top, looking out over the grid of the city shimmering in the heat, I felt a surge of pride that nearly knocked me over. I took a picture of the view. The sun was rising, painting the sky in violent shades of purple and orange. Old habits die hard. Though, without thinking, I opened the Gomez Fam Bam chat and posted the photo. First hike in Arizona. The view is incredible. I typed. I waited. I checked my phone 10 minutes later. Nothing. I checked it an hour later. Nothing. That evening, I posted a picture of my kitchen. I had set it up with a new espresso machine I had bought as a housewarming gift to myself. Finally unpacked, I wrote, "Coffee at my place is officially open for business." 2 days later, my brother posted a link to a sale on gaming monitors. That was the only activity in the chat. My sunset and my espresso machine were just stones thrown into a deep, dark well. They did not even make a splash. I tried calling a week later. It was a Sunday. the time I would usually be chopping vegetables in my mother's kitchen. I dialed the landline. My mom picked up on the fourth ring. "Hello?" She sounded breathless. "Hey, Mom, it is Hazel." I said, "Oh, Hazel." She said, "Listen, can I call you back? Your aunt is here and we are trying to figure out why the oven is not heating up." "Sure," I said. "Call me back whenever." She hung up without saying goodbye. I stared at my phone. I knew, with the certainty of a scientist observing a recurring phenomenon, that she would not call back. She would fix the oven. They would eat. She would complain about her feet. She would watch TV. And I would simply not exist in her operational memory. By the fourth month, something shifted inside me. It was not a snap. It was more like a slow dissolve. I stopped taking pictures of my life to send to them. I stopped drafting text messages that I knew would go unread. I stopped checking the group chat to see if they had noticed my absence. I just stopped. And the moment I stopped trying to pull on the rope, I realized I was the only one holding it. It fell to the ground. And the tension in my shoulders, a tension I had carried since I was 16 years old, vanished. My life in Arizona began to take a solid, tangible shape. I found a taco shop on the corner of my street where the owner, a man named Diego, knew my order by heart: 3 al pastor tacos and a horchata. I went to movies alone and enjoyed eating all the popcorn myself. I spent my weekends exploring the desert, learning the names of the cacti and the rhythm of the sun. It was lonely. Yes. There were Friday nights when I sat on my balcony and watched the cars drive by and wished I had someone to tell about my week. But it was an honest loneliness. It was better to be alone in an empty apartment than to be alone in a room full of people who shared your DNA. Here, the silence was my choice. It was peaceful. I was building a life that fit me, not shrinking myself to fit into the cracks of someone else's. I was happy, or at least, I was content in a way I had never been before. I was real. Then came the Tuesday in late February. I was at work, reviewing a stack of audit reports. When my phone buzzed, it was a notification from my email. I usually ignored personal emails during work hours, but the subject line caught my eye. Confirmation of contact information update. It was from the State Department of Motor Vehicles back home. I frowned. I had transferred my license to Arizona 3 months ago. I had surrendered my old plates. I had cut ties with that bureaucracy completely. I opened the email. Dear Hazel Gomez, this email is to confirm that your request to update the mailing address on file has been processed successfully. If you did not make this change, please contact us immediately. I sat back in my ergonomic chair, the hum of the office air conditioning fading into the background. I read the email again. I had not requested an update. I had closed that file. My first thought was that it was a glitch. Government systems were notorious for being outdated and clunky. Maybe their system had finally caught up with my move and was sending a belated confirmation. But then I saw the date of the request. It was dated yesterday. And the new address listed was not my apartment in Phoenix. It was not my parents' house. It was an address I did not recognize. A P.O. box in a town 3 towns over from where I grew up. A cold prickle of unease started at the base of my neck. Why would the DM5 back home be updating my file? And why would they be moving my address to a P.O. box I had never rented? I hovered my mouse over the link to the dispute form. It felt small. It felt like a clerical error. But my gut, the same gut that had told me to drive away and never look back, tightened. I had spent months accepting that I was invisible to my family. I had made peace with being forgotten, but as I stared at that screen, I realized that being forgotten was one thing. Being used was something else entirely. Someone had not just forgotten I left. Someone was counting on it. It was month 7 when the delusion finally shattered. By April, the desert heat was beginning to flex its muscles, turning my morning commute into a bright, blinding drive through a landscape that looked nothing like the gray, overcast suburbs of my childhood. I had fallen into a rhythm. I worked, I hiked, I paid my bills, and I existed in a peaceful vacuum where my family was concerned. The silence had become a texture I wore comfortably, like a well-broken-in pair of boots. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, my phone vibrated against the mahogany surface of my desk. It was a text from my sister. This in itself was rare. Usually, she only communicated through group chat memes or requests for links to things I had already sent her. "Hey," the message read, "can you swing by the insurance agent's office on Main Street today before 5? They need a signature on the policy renewal for Dad's truck. I am stuck in a meeting and Mom says she has a migraine." I stared at the screen. The request was so mundane, so utterly casual, that for a split second, I thought I had hallucinated the last 7 months of my life. I actually looked out the window at the saguaro cactus standing sentinel in the parking lot, just to confirm my own location. I picked up the phone and typed back, "I cannot do that." The reply came instant. "Why? Are you busy? It will only take 10 minutes. I felt a vein in my temple throb. It was not anger. It was a profound sense of disorientation. I typed slowly, enunciating the words in my head as my thumbs hit the glass. "I am in Arizona. I have lived in Arizona since October." I watched the screen. The little gray bubble with the 3 dancing dots appeared. It pulsed for a long time. It vanished. Then it appeared again. Then it vanished again. It was like watching a mime perform a scene about confusion. Finally, her reply popped up. "Stop joking. Seriously. I need you to go. Dad is stressing out about it." I read the words, "Stop joking," 3 times. I let out a sound that was half laugh, half gasp. It was a sour, jagged noise that made my coworker in the next cubicle glance over the partition. I did not reply. I put the phone face down. There was no way to reply to that. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a refusal of reality. To my sister. My location was not a geographical fact. It was a mood I was in. She thought I was playing hard to get. She thought my move across the country was a bit I was committing to, a dramatic flair that I would drop as soon as there was an errand to be run. But the universe, it seemed, was not done with me that week. 2 days later, on Thursday, I received a notification from a credit monitoring service I had signed up for years ago and largely ignored. It was an email alert. "New inquiry detected." I frowned. I had not applied for anything. I was not buying a car. I was not opening a new card. I clicked the link, expecting to see a glitch or perhaps a soft check from my existing bank. The screen loaded. It showed a hard inquiry from a local credit union back in my hometown. The date was yesterday. My stomach did not drop. It turned into a block of ice. I picked up my office phone and dialed the number for the credit union. I put on my best compliance officer voice. Cold, professional, and brook no argument. "This is Hazel Gomez," I said when the loan officer picked up. "I am looking at an inquiry on my credit report dated yesterday. I did not authorize this." There was the sound of typing on the other end. "Well, Ms. Gomez," the officer said, his voice cheerful and oblivious, "we have the application right here. It is for a personal loan, $5,000. It looks like it was submitted in person at our downtown branch." I gripped the receiver so hard my knuckles turned white. "In person?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "That is impossible." I said, "I am in Phoenix, Arizona. I was in Phoenix, Arizona yesterday. I have been in Phoenix, Arizona for 7 months." The typing stopped. "Oh," the officer said. The cheerfulness evaporated. "Are you sure?" "Am I sure where I am?" I asked. "Yes, I am quite sure." "Who submitted the application?" "Well, the applicant had your identification," he said, sounding defensive now, "or copies of it, and the co-applicant listed is, let me see, Alan Gomez, my father." The air in the room seemed to vanish. I could hear the hum of the server room down the hall. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. It was not a stranger. It was not a faceless hacker in a basement on the other side of the world. "I need you to cancel that application immediately," I said. My voice was deadly quiet. "And I need you to mark it as fraudulent. I will have to speak to the manager if we are going to flag it as fraud." He stammered, If it is a family member, I did not let him finish. Cancel it. I said, I will handle the rest. I hung up. My hands were shaking. Not with fear, but with a sudden, violent clarity. I opened my laptop. I logged into everything. I went through my bank statements, my old email accounts, the digital debris of the life I thought I had left behind. I found it. It was not just the loan. There was a utility bill for the house back home that had been switched into my name 3 months ago. There was a renewal for a gym membership I had canceled 2 years ago. Suddenly reactivated with a signature that looked like a drunken spider had tried to write Hazel. There was a medical bill for an urgent care visit in December, a time when I was hiking in Sedona, that had been routed to my insurance. I sat back in my chair. The office around me was bustling with the pre-weekend energy of Friday afternoon, but I felt like I was sitting in the center of a crater. For months. I had told myself the story of the sad daughter. The story went like this. Hazel is good, Hazel is loyal, but Hazel is invisible. Her family ignores her because they are self-absorbed. It hurts, but it is a passive hurt. It is a crime of omission. I looked at the screen. I looked at the dates. The utility bill. November. The urgent care visit. December. The loan application. Yesterday. They knew I was gone. They had to know. You do not forge someone's signature if you think they are going to walk through the door and catch you. You do not use someone's social security number to secure a loan unless you are absolutely certain they are too far away to notice the mail. My sister's text, stop joking, was not denial. It was gaslighting. It was a command. Come back to the role we assigned you. Be the person who signs the papers. Be the person who absorbs the debt. Be the person who exists solely to make our lives frictionless. And if you are not here to do it, we will just do it for you. The phrase they did not notice died in my throat. It was replaced by something much darker, something that tasted like copper and ash. They noticed. They noticed I was gone, and they realized that my absence was an opportunity. They were not missing me. They were looting me. I closed my laptop. The screen went black, reflecting my own face back at me. I looked different than I had 7 months ago. My skin was a little darker from the desert sun. My hair was shorter, but it was the eyes that were different. The softness was gone. The pleading look, the look that begged for a scrap of attention, had been burned away. I was done being the ghost. I was done being the convenient excuse. I reached for my phone, but I did not call my sister. I did not call my father. I did not send a text begging for an explanation. I opened a new browser tab and searched for flight schedules to Chicago. Then, I opened another tab and searched for forensic accountants. If they wanted Hazel Gomez to be present, I would be present. But I was not coming back as the daughter who fixed the Wi-Fi. I was coming back as the auditor, and I was going to bring the whole house of cards down. The phone rang at 8 in the evening on a Saturday. I was sitting on my balcony, watching the desert sky turn a bruised purple over the silhouette of the Superstition Mountains. My laptop was open on the small patio table, the screen glowing with the evidence of the fraudulent loan application I had uncovered the day before. I looked at the caller ID. Mom, I knew this call was coming. The timing was too precise. My refusal to run the errand for my sister had likely percolated through the family grapevine, mutated into a grievous insult, and finally reached the matriarch. I picked up the phone. I did not say hello. I just pressed the green button and held it to my ear. Hazel. My mother's voice was a serrated blade. You have some nerve. I took a sip of my iced tea. The condensation on the glass was cold against my fingers. Good evening to you too. Mom, I said. Do not get smart with me, she snapped. Aunt Maria just called me. She said you were not at her 50th birthday party. She said she set a place for you and you just did not show up. Do you know how much that catering cost per head? Do you know how stupid I looked explaining that my daughter is too important to show up for family? I looked at the cactus in the corner of my balcony. It was thriving. It required nothing from me but sunlight and space. I did not show up because I am not there. I said, "Oh, stop it," she shouted. "Stop with the excuses. You are always busy. You are always working." But this was 50 years. Hazel, 50. You could have driven over for an hour. It is selfish. It is completely irresponsible. I let her finish. I let the echo of her accusation hang in the warm night air. Mom, I said, my voice steady, devoid of the trembling that used to plague me when I was younger. I did not drive over for an hour because that drive would take me 26 hours. I live in Arizona. The line went dead silent. It was not a technical glitch. It was the silence of a brain hitting a wall it refused to acknowledge. What are you talking about? She asked, her tone dropping from anger to a dismissive scoff. I live in Arizona, I repeated. I moved here 7 months ago. I work here. I sleep here. I pay rent here. No, you did not, she said immediately. The speed of her denial was breathtaking. You never said anything about moving to Arizona. I closed my eyes for a second, summoning the file folder in my brain where I kept the timeline. I told you at Sunday dinner on September 12th. I said, I made chicken enchiladas. I told everyone at the table I got a job at Stratos Solutions and was moving in October. You asked me if I bought limes. That never happened. She said, I told you again via email on October 5th. I continued, my voice hardening. The subject line was moving logistics. I included my new address. You replied asking for the Netflix password. I do not read all those emails. She said, you know I am bad with technology. I told Dad in the garage while he was fixing his fishing tackle. I said, I told the family group chat on September 28th. Michelle replied with a video of a cat. Dad sent a thumbs up. You are making this up, she said, her voice rising again. Hysterical now. You are gaslighting me. You never sat us down and had a serious conversation. You just snuck off. I gripped the phone tight. Serious conversation? I asked. Mom, I called you the night before I left. I told you I was driving out the next morning at 5. You told me to drink water and pick up milk on Sunday. I thought you were going on a trip, she yelled. I thought you were going on vacation. Who goes on vacation for 7 months? I asked. Who moves all their furniture on a vacation? You should have made it clearer, she screamed. The accusation tore through the speaker. You cannot just drop a bomb like that in a text message. You should have made sure we understood. I felt a cold, sharp laugh bubble up in my chest. It was not funny, but the absurdity was so immense it demanded a physical reaction. Clearer? I asked. How much clearer? Did you want me to rent a billboard on the interstate? Did you want me to hire a skywriter to put it in the clouds over the house? I told you 6 times. 6 times. Mom, the problem is not that I was not clear. The problem is that you were not listening. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing. Short, angry puffs of air. Then, the tone shifted. She abandoned the denial and went for the guilt. You are enjoying this, aren't you? She said, her voice trembling with performative victimhood. You enjoy making me look like a bad mother. Mrs. Perez asked me last week how you were doing, and I said you were fine. I did not know I was lying. Do you know how humiliating that is? To not know where your own daughter lives? Yes, I said. I imagine it is humiliating. But you are not embarrassed because you miss me. You are embarrassed because your friends realized you do not know the first thing about my life. How dare you, she hissed. We gave you everything. We put a roof over your head, and then you stopped looking at who was under it. I cut in. I stood up and walked to the edge of the balcony. The city lights of Phoenix were a grid of gold and white stretching out to the horizon. Do you remember my college graduation? I asked. What does that have to do with anything? You were an hour late, I said. You missed my name being called because you were arguing with Dad about parking. Do you remember my promotion 3 years ago? I told you at lunch, and you spent the whole meal talking about Michelle's breakup. We were going through a lot then, she defended. You are always going through a lot. I said, and that is fine. But do not call me 7 months after I leave and scream at me for missing a party. I did not miss the party. Mom, I was never invited because you never updated your address book. You are being cruel, she sobbed. This is not you. Who is putting these ideas in your head? Nobody. I said, that is the point. I am alone out here. And I have never been clearer-headed in my life. I am done discussing this, she said, trying to regain control. You need to come home, and we will talk about this face to face. We need to fix this. I looked back at my laptop screen. I looked at the credit inquiry with my father's name listed as a co-applicant. We are not going to fix this, I said, because you still do not understand what is broken. I am your mother, she screamed. And I am a person, I shouted back, my voice finally cracking, the composure fracturing for just a second. I am a human being who exists even when I am not in your kitchen. The silence that followed was heavy. It was final. This conversation is not about me moving. Mom, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. This is about the fact that you never looked at me. You only looked at the space I occupied. And now that the space is empty, you are angry. But you are not angry at me. You are angry at the empty chair. Hazel, she started. Goodbye, Mom, I said. I pulled the phone away from my ear and pressed the red button. I stood there for a long time. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, bird-like rhythm, but my hands were steady. I waited for the guilt to come. That was the old pattern. I would stand up for myself, and then the crushing weight of Catholic guilt and filial duty would buckle my knees. I would feel like a monster for making my mother cry. I waited. A minute passed, then 2. The guilt did not come. Instead, I felt a strange, cold clarity washing over me. It was like stepping out of a noisy, overheated room into the crisp night air. I realized that the woman on the phone was not mourning the loss of a relationship. She was mourning the loss of a convenience. She was upset because the appliance she relied on had unplugged itself. I turned back to the table. I sat down in front of my laptop. The screen had dimmed, but a tap of the spacebar brought it back to life. The PDF of the fraudulent loan application stared back at me. $5,000. Signature forged. Co-applicant, Alan Gomez. I looked at the date again. They had filed this yesterday. If I had not answered the phone just now, if I had not had that conversation, I might have tried to convince myself it was a mistake. I might have tried to talk myself into believing it was a misunderstanding. A clerical error. A clumsy attempt by my dad to help me that went wrong. But after that call, I knew the truth. They did not think I was gone. They just did not care. Or worse, they thought that because I was invisible, my name was up for grabs. They thought my credit score, my financial identity, and my legal standing were communal property, just like my time and my energy had always been. My mother had accused me of sneaking off. She had accused me of being irresponsible. I opened a new folder on my desktop. I named it Case File 001. I was not going to cry myself to sleep. I was not going to send a long, emotional text message explaining my feelings. I was a compliance officer. I investigated fraud for a living. I tracked down discrepancies. I enforced consequences. I reached for my mouse and clicked on the search bar. I began to type, my fingers moving with precision and purpose. I was going to pull every record, every bank statement, every piece of mail that had been delivered to that house in the last 7 months. I was not doing this because I was hurt. Hurt was a soft emotion. Hurt was for children. I was doing this because they had made a mistake. They thought Hazel Gomez was a doormat. They were about to find out that Hazel Gomez was the person who signed off on the audits, and I was about to audit my entire family. I sat in the glow of my monitor. The rest of the apartment submerged in darkness. The anger from the phone call with my mother had cooled into something far more clinical and dangerous. I was no longer the hurt daughter. I was the auditor, and I had just found a discrepancy that demanded a full forensic review. I pulled up the detailed credit report from all 3 bureaus. It cost me $30 for the premium access, but I would have paid 10 times that for the clarity it provided. The loan application I had found earlier was just the tip of the iceberg. As I scrolled down the screen, my eyes snagged on a new entry under the section labeled Hard Inquiries. There was an application for a store credit card at a high-end home improvement chain. Status: approved. Credit limit: $6,000. Balance: $4,200. I clicked on the digital copy of the contract. The PDF loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, revealing a document signed 3 weeks ago. I zoomed in on the signature line. There was my name, Hazel Gomez, written in blue ink. It looped and slanted to the right. To a stranger, it looked legitimate. But to me, it looked like a caricature. I have not looped my G like that since I was a sophomore in high school. My professional signature, the one I had used on thousands of compliance documents over the last decade, was tight, vertical, and sharp. This signature was soft. It was hesitant. It was an imitation drawn from memory by someone who had not seen my handwriting in years. Next to the signature was the date, January 15th. On January 15th, I was in a mandatory all-day training session in Scottsdale. I had 15 witnesses and a security badge log to prove it. I physically could not have been standing at a customer service desk in New Jersey signing for financing on a new patio set. My eyes moved to the contact information box. Address, 42 Oak Creek Lane, my parents' house. Phone, a number ending in 8920. I pulled out my phone and checked my contacts. It was not my number. It was not my parents' landline. It was not my sister's cell. I dialed it, my heart hammering a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. It rang 4 times. Then, a voicemail picked up. It was a generic robotic voice. The subscriber you have dialed is not available. I hung up and typed the number into a reverse lookup tool I used for work. The results came back in seconds. It was a prepaid burner phone. Activated 2 months ago, the realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not my father getting confused about co-signing rules. This was a premeditated setup. Someone had bought a burner phone to list on applications so that when the banks called to verify the identity, they would call the burner. Not me. They knew. They knew I was gone. They knew I was not checking. And they had built a system to keep it that way. I needed to verify who was holding the smoking gun. I picked up my phone again. It was late back east, almost 11 at night. But I did not care. I called my brother first. He picked up on the second ring, sounding groggy. Hello? Leo, I said. I am looking at a credit card application for a home improvement store. It was opened in my name 3 weeks ago. Do you know anything about this? There was a pause, a long, heavy pause. I could hear the rustle of sheets. What? No. Why would I know about that? He said. His voice was pitched too high. It was the voice he used when he was 10 and broke a vase. Someone bought $4,000 worth of lumber and patio furniture. Leo, I said, did you guys build a new deck recently? I mean, Dad fixed the porch, he stammered, but I do not know how he paid for it. Look, Hazel, it is late. Maybe it is identity theft. You should call the bank. He hung up. I stared at the phone. He knew. He absolutely knew. I called my sister, Michelle. She sent me to voicemail immediately. I called again. She picked up, whispering, I am putting the baby to sleep. Hazel, what is your problem? My problem is fraud. Michelle, I said, keeping my voice level. Who has access to my old mail? What kind of question is that? She hissed. The mail comes to the house. Mom puts it on the counter. Does she? I asked, because I just found out a credit card was mailed to the house in my name. Activated and used. If Mom puts the mail on the counter, who picked up that envelope? You are being crazy, she said. Mom probably just put it in your pile. We have a pile for you. Maybe Dad opened it by accident. He does not read the names half the time. You do not accidentally activate a card and buy $4,000 of merchandise. Michelle, I said, stop trying to start drama, she snapped. Just ask Dad in the morning. It is probably a mix-up. God, you are so uptight. She hung up. I sat there, the silence of my apartment amplifying the noise in my head. Mix-up, accident, identity theft. They were throwing words at me like chaff, hoping to confuse the radar, but the most chilling detail was the mail. For a credit card to be used, the physical card has to be intercepted, the welcome packet has to be opened, the PIN has to be set. For 7 months. I had assumed my lack of mail from home was because I had successfully gone paperless. But now I realized the truth. Statements had been arriving. Pre-approved offers had been arriving. And someone in that house, the house where I grew up, the house where I learned to walk, had been intercepting them. They had been sorting through my financial privacy like they were sorting laundry. This one we keep. This one we use. If I had asked them about it, they would have said, "Oh, we forgot to tell you it came." They used their own negligence as a shield. They hid their malice behind their reputation for being scatterbrained. I felt a wave of nausea. It was a violation so intimate it felt like I had been physically assaulted. They had not just stolen my money. They had stolen my autonomy. They had looked at my good credit score, a score I built by eating ramen and working overtime, and decided it was a family resource. I stood up and paced the small length of my living room. I needed to act. I needed to stop thinking like a daughter and start thinking like a stranger. I sat back down and opened 3 new tabs. First, I went to the credit bureau portals. Freeze my credit. I clicked the button for Equifax. Locked. I clicked the button for Experian. Locked. I clicked the button for TransUnion. Locked. I set a PIN that was a random string of numbers. Nothing related to birthdays or anniversaries. Next, I went to the Federal Identity Theft Government site. I began filling out the affidavit. Name, Hazel Gomez. Victim of identity theft. Relationship to suspect. Family. My finger hovered over the submit button. If I filed this officially, it would trigger a police investigation. It would mean felony charges. It would mean my father, or my mother, or my brother, could face jail time. I looked at the photo of my family on my digital desktop wallpaper. It was from 2 Christmases ago. Everyone was smiling. I was in the back, half obscured by my dad's shoulder. I did not want to put them in prison. Despite everything, the neglect, the gaslighting, the theft, the idea of seeing my father in handcuffs made my stomach turn. But I also refused to be the collateral damage of their entitlement. I refused to spend the next 10 years paying off a patio set I would never sit on. I did not submit the police report yet. I printed it. I saved it as a PDF. Then, I searched for legal counsel in Arizona. I found a firm that specialized in family financial fraud. I drafted an email to them, attaching the timeline, the fake signature, and the evidence of the burner phone. I need to know my options. I wrote, I want to resolve this, but I need leverage. I need to know how to stop them without destroying them, unless they leave me no choice. I hit send. It was 1 a.m. I was exhausted, but my mind was razor sharp. The sadness was gone. The confusion was gone. What remained was a cold, hard resolve. They thought they could handle Hazel. They thought Hazel would cry, complain, and eventually pay the bill to keep the peace. They thought Hazel would fade away. I closed my laptop. I walked into my bedroom and pulled my suitcase out from under the bed. I unzipped it. I was not going to send an email about this. I was not going to have another phone call where they could hang up or lie or gaslight me. I was going to go home, but I was not going for a visit. I was going for a deposition. I booked a flight for 2 days from now. I paid extra for a seat in the front row. I wanted to be the first one off the plane. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan cutting through the shadows, I formulated my plan. I would not scream. I would not cry. I would walk into that house with a stack of papers and a list of demands. They wanted my signature? Fine. I would give them one last thing to sign. And this time, they would be the ones reading the fine print. The shift in strategy happened exactly 48 hours after I froze my credit. It was as if an invisible alarm had gone off in the Gomez household, signaling that the usual tactics of dismissal and gaslighting were no longer effective. The silence from their end, which had previously been a weapon to make me feel small, suddenly turned into a barrage of warmth. My mother sent me a text with a heart emoji. My sister sent a picture of my nephew holding a drawing that vaguely resembled a stick figure. My father left a voicemail that did not ask for a tool or a password, but simply said he hoped the weather in Phoenix was nice. Then came the request. It was my mother again, but her voice on the voicemail was unrecognizable. It was soft, trembling, and dripping with a manufactured fragility. "Hazel," she said, "please call us back. We feel terrible that there has been such a misunderstanding. We cannot talk about this over the phone. Signals get crossed. Voices get raised. We need to see you. We need to sit down and clear the air. Please come home for the weekend. We can have a nice dinner. Just family." I listened to the message twice, a year ago. That tone would have broken me. I would have booked the first flight home, desperate to soothe her anxiety, eager to take the blame just to restore the peace. But I was not that Hazel anymore. I was an auditor who had seen the fraudulent balance on a home improvement credit card. I knew that misunderstanding was their code word for "we got caught and need to spin the narrative." I called back, but I did not apologize. "I will come," I said. "But we are not doing this at the house." "What?" my mother asked, caught off guard. "Why not?" "I will make your favorite roast." "No," I said. "We are going to meet at Luigi's." Luigi's was a loud, bustling Italian restaurant downtown where our extended family often held celebrations. It was public, it was crowded, and it was neutral ground. Mom hesitated, "But it is just a family talk." "Why do we need to go out?" "Because I'm coming into town for Aunt Rosa's retirement dinner anyway." I lied smoothly. I knew the dinner was that Saturday because I had seen the invite on Facebook. The invite they had forgotten to send me. "We can talk before the guests arrive." In the main dining room, I could hear the gears turning in her head. She could not say no without admitting she did not want witnesses. "Fine," she said tightly. "Saturday at 6. I hung up and turned to my printer. It had been whirring for the last hour, spitting out warm, crisp sheets of paper. I was not going to this dinner with just my feelings. Feelings were subjective. Feelings could be argued with. My family excelled at dismantling feelings. They would tell me I was too sensitive, that I was imagining things, that I was remembering it wrong. So I prepared to bring the one thing they could not dismantle: documentation. I bought 2 binders, sturdy, black, professional binders. In the first binder, I assembled the timeline. I labeled it clearly: communications and notifications regarding relocation. I punched holes in the screenshots of the group chat. I included the email with the subject line, "Moving Logistics," and the time-stamped reply about the Netflix password. I included the call logs from my cell provider, highlighting the dates and durations of the calls where I had explicitly stated my departure. I even included a copy of the lease agreement I had sent to my dad's email when I needed a reference, which he had never opened. This binder was the shield. It was the defense against the "you never told us" narrative. The second binder was the sword. I did not label this one. Inside, I placed the credit report. I highlighted the hard inquiries. I included the PDF of the loan application with the forged signature. I included the transaction history of the credit card used for the patio furniture. I included the photo of the signature on the receipt, which I had obtained by calling the store's loss prevention department and claiming I was doing a personal audit. I organized it all with the cold precision of a prosecutor. There was no emotion in the paper. There were just facts, dates, amounts, IP addresses. On Thursday night, I went to Sarah's apartment. Sarah was the colleague from HR who had first invited me hiking. She was also terrified of conflict, but she was brilliant at corporate communication. "I need you to drill me," I told her. She sat on her couch, holding a glass of wine. "Okay. Pretend I am your mom. Hazel, you are making such a big deal out of nothing. We are family." I took a breath. I wanted to scream. I wanted to launch into a 5-minute monologue about respect and boundaries. "That is not the point," I began. "I feel like you do not respect me when—" "Stop," Sarah said. She held up a hand. "Too many words. You are explaining. When you explain, you are giving them permission to argue with your reasoning. Try again," she said. I looked at her. "The unauthorized use of my credit is a crime, not a family matter." I said. "Better," Sarah said, "but colder. Take the emotion out." I tried again. "I did not authorize those charges. I require them to be paid." Sarah nodded. "Perfect. Short, dull. Do not give them a handle to grab onto. If they ask why you are doing this, do not say because I am hurt. Say because it is fraud." We practiced for 2 hours. I learned the art of the gray rock method. I learned to say no without following it with because. I learned that silence was not a void to be filled, but a wall to stand behind. I also set a rule for myself, a hard line in the sand. If anyone raises their voice, I leave. If anyone blames me for their actions, I leave. If anyone tries to touch me to keep me from leaving, I call the police. I was not going there to fight. I was going there to deliver a verdict. On Saturday morning, I drove to the airport. The Phoenix sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. As I walked through the terminal, pulling my carry-on behind me, I felt a strange sensation. My heart was not racing. My palms were not sweating. Usually, a trip home meant a regression. I would get on the plane as a 30-year-old professional and get off as a clumsy, apologetic teenager. I would shrink. I would fold myself into the small, convenient shape they expected. But as I sat at the gate, waiting for boarding Group B, I looked down at my bag. The binders were inside, heavy and solid. I was not going back to ask for their love. I had spent decades begging for crumbs of affection, performing tricks of service and obedience, hoping for a round of applause that never came. I did not want their love anymore. Love from people who steal your identity is not love. It is parasitism. I wanted their respect. And if I could not have their respect, I would settle for their fear. I boarded the plane and took my seat. I declined the offer of a drink. I stared out the window as the plane taxied down the runway. As the wheels left the ground, leaving the desert behind, I closed my eyes. I ran through the timeline one last time. September 12th, October 5th, January 15th. I knew my lines. I had my evidence. The flight was 4 hours. I spent every minute of it visualizing the dinner table. I saw their faces. I saw the shock. I saw the inevitable attempt to turn the tables. But this time, I was not bringing a knife to a gunfight. I was bringing the law. When the pilot announced our descent, I opened my eyes. The landscape below was green and cluttered. The clouds were gray. It looked like the past, but I was not the past. I was the reckoning. Luigi's was exactly as loud as I remembered. The air smelled of garlic knots and marinara sauce, and the din of 40 different conversations bounced off the faux brick walls. I walked into the main dining room at 6:05. My family was already seated at a large round table near the kitchen. They looked up as I approached. There was a beat of silence, and then the performance began. My mother stood up, wiping her hands on a napkin, her face arranging itself into a mask of bewildered affection. "Hazel," she exclaimed, reaching out as if to hug me. "Look who decided to grace us with her presence. We were just saying we didn't know if you'd actually show up. You have been so hard to pin down lately." She made it sound like I was a flaky teenager who had lost track of time at the mall, not a woman who had flown 2,000 miles to confront a felony. I did not hug her. I pulled out the chair opposite my father and sat down. I placed my bag on the floor and laid the 2 black binders on the table in front of me. The thud they made was heavy enough to rattle the silverware. I am not hard to pin down. "Mom," I said, my voice cutting through the noise of the restaurant, "I am in Arizona." My sister, Michelle, rolled her eyes and tore a piece of bread from the basket. "Here we go again with the Arizona thing." She said to the room, "Can we just order? I am starving." My mother sat back down, sighing theatrically. "Hazel, honey," she said, her voice dropping to that condescending register she used when she thought I was being hysterical. "We are all glad you are here, but you have to understand why we are upset. You cannot just run away and not tell anyone. It scares us." I looked around the table. My brother, Leo, was staring intently at his menu, refusing to make eye contact. My father was drinking his iced tea a little too quickly. I did not run away. I said, "And I did not fail to tell you." "Oh, stop." My mother waved a hand. "You think you said something, but you didn't. You are always in your head." "Hazel, you think thoughts count as conversations." I opened the first binder. I did not think it. I said, "I documented it. I flipped to the first tab. September 12th. I said, keeping my tone flat and professional. Sunday dinner. I announced I was moving to Phoenix for a job at Stratos Solutions. Mom, you asked if I bought limes. Dad, you asked for the salsa. I flipped the page. September 28th. Group chat. I posted, I am moving to Arizona next week. Michelle. You replied with a video of a cat. I spun the binder around so the laminated screenshot faced them. The image of the text thread was blown up, undeniable in high definition. Michelle squinted at it. Who remembers a text from 7 months ago? She scoffed. People send texts all the time. That doesn't mean anything. I flipped to the next page. October 5th. Email sent to Mom. Subject, moving logistics, included address, dates, and contact info. Mom, you replied asking for the Netflix password. I pointed to the timestamp. You opened the email. Mom, you hit reply. You cannot say you didn't see it. You just didn't care to read it. My mother's face flushed. This is ridiculous, she hissed, looking around to see if other tables were watching. You brought a binder to dinner? This is exactly what I mean. You are obsessive. You are trying to make us look bad because you feel guilty for abandoning us. I closed the first binder. I do not feel guilty, I said, and I'm not trying to make you look bad. I am establishing a baseline. A baseline for what? My father asked. His voice was rough. It was the first time he had spoken. For this, I said. I opened the second binder. The atmosphere at the table shifted instantly. The first binder was an annoyance. It was just Hazel being petty about feelings. But the second binder looked different. It contained legal-sized documents. It contained bank logos. If you really didn't know I moved, I said, my eyes locking onto my father's, then why did you think I was available to sign a loan application at the credit union 3 days ago? The silence that fell over the table was absolute. The clatter of the restaurant seemed to fade away. My father put his glass down. His hand shook, just a fraction, causing the ice cubes to chime against the glass. I do not know what you are talking about, he said. I pulled out the loan application, $5,000. I read, applicant, Hazel Gomez, co-applicant, Alan Gomez, date of signature, last Thursday. I slid the paper across the table. It stopped right in front of his plate. I was in Phoenix on Thursday. Dad, I said, I was at work. I have a security log that proves I swiped my badge at 8 in the morning and left at 6. So, who walked into the bank with you and signed my name? My mother looked at the paper, then at my father. Alan? She whispered. He didn't look at her. He looked at me, and his face wasn't confused. It was panicked. It was just a bridge loan. He muttered, just to cover the truck repairs until the bonus came in. I was going to pay it off next month. You wouldn't have even known. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but I pushed it down. I wouldn't have known? I repeated. It is on my credit report. Dad, that is my financial identity. You committed fraud. It is not fraud, my sister interjected, though she looked pale. It is family. We help each other. Dad needed the truck for work. You have a fancy job now. You have plenty of money. Why are you being so stingy? I turned to her. And the patio furniture? I asked. I pulled out the second document. The credit card statement from the home improvement store. $4,200. I said, signed January 15th. Michelle's mouth snapped shut. I looked at the signature on the receipt copy. That is not even a good forgery. I said, you looped the G? I haven't written my G like that since high school. My mother looked from my father to my sister. She looked like she was watching a car crash in slow motion. You bought the patio set? She asked Michelle. You told me you won that in a contest at work. Michelle crossed her arms, defensive and shrinking at the same time. I needed it, she said, her voice rising. My backyard looked like trash. Hazel wasn't using her credit. She wasn't even here. I slammed the binder shut. And there it is, I said. I stood up. I felt 10 feet tall. You all claim you didn't know I moved, I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. You screamed at me for not telling you. You made me feel crazy. But here's the truth. I leaned over the table. If you didn't know I moved, why didn't you call me when my mail kept coming to the house? Why didn't you text me and say, Hazel, you have a credit card offer here? I looked at my father. You knew I wasn't there to open the mailbox. Dad, you knew. Because if I had been living at home, I would have seen the statements. You counted on me being gone. You used my absence to steal from me. And then you used my silence to cover it up. My father looked down at his lap. My mother was staring at him with a look of horror, not because he had done it, I realized, but because he had been caught. Hazel, please, my mother said, reaching for my hand. Sit down. People are staring. We can fix this. We will pay it back. Just don't make a scene. I pulled my hand away. I am not making a scene. Mom, I said, I am making a report. I picked up the binders. I have already filed a fraud alert with the credit bureaus. I said, the accounts are frozen, and on Monday morning, I am filing an affidavit of identity theft with the police. My father's head snapped up. You wouldn't, he said, you wouldn't put your own father in jail. I am not putting you in jail. I said, you put yourself in jeopardy when you signed my name. I am just protecting myself. Because if I don't report this as fraud, the law says I am liable for the debt, and I am not paying $5,000 for a truck I don't drive and a patio I don't sit on. But family, my sister started to cry. Family doesn't steal. Michelle, I said coldly. I looked at them one last time. They looked small. They looked pathetic. They were not the giants who had ruled my life with their indifference. They were just people who had gotten used to taking things that didn't belong to them. I am staying at a hotel. I said, do not come there. If you want to talk to me, you can talk to the fraud investigator who will be calling you next week. I turned and walked away. The waiter was coming toward the table with a tray of water glasses. I stepped around him. Behind me, I heard my mother start to sob, and my father start to shout at Michelle. They were already turning on each other. The alliance of convenience had shattered the moment the bill came due. I walked out into the cool evening air of the parking lot. I got into my rental car and locked the doors. I sat there for a moment, waiting for the tears. But there were no tears. There was only the hum of the engine and the clean, quiet knowledge that for the first time in my life, I was visible, and I was terrifying. My hand was on the gear shift, ready to put the rental car into reverse, when a fist pounded on the driver's side window. It was my father. His face was flushed, sweat beading on his forehead under the parking lot lights. Behind him, my mother and sister were hurrying across the asphalt, their heels clicking frantically. Hazel, open the door, my father shouted through the glass. Do not drive away like this. I looked at him. A year ago, I would have unlocked the door immediately. I would have been terrified of his anger. But now, looking at him through the safety of the glass, I saw a man who was afraid of what I carried in my passenger seat. I rolled the window down 3 inches. We are done talking. Dad, I said. No, we are not. My mother panted. Arriving at his shoulder, she looked around nervously at the people leaving the restaurant. Come back inside. The manager said we can use the private room in the back. We can sit down and work this out quietly. No one needs to know. I shook my head. I'm not going into a private room. I said, I am not going into a dark corner so you can whisper me into submission. That is how we got here. You counted on everything staying in the dark. You are ruining this family, my mother burst out, tears finally spilling over. She grabbed the door handle, pulling uselessly against the lock. You are destroying us over money. We are your flesh and blood, and you are acting like a police officer. How can you be so cold? You are tearing this family apart. I looked her dead in the eye. The family is not breaking because of the truth. Mom, I said, it is breaking because of what you did. You cannot blame the structural engineer when the house collapses because you stole the beams to build a patio. It wasn't stealing, my sister screamed from behind them. It was borrowing. We were going to pay you back. I was going to pay you back as soon as I got my bonus. I shifted my gaze to Michelle. When? I asked. When were you going to tell me? When the collection agency called me? When my credit score tanked and I couldn't rent an apartment? I didn't think you would find out so fast, she mumbled, looking at her shoes. And that is the real truth, isn't it? I said. You didn't think I would find out. You banked on me being the oblivious, invisible girl who signs whatever you put in front of her. My father leaned his forehead against the window glass. He looked defeated. I was drowning. Hazel, he whispered, the business has been slow. The truck needed a transmission. The bank wouldn't give me a loan because my credit is shot. I saw the pre-approved offer come in the mail for you. It was just sitting on the counter. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. So you opened it, I said. I hid it first, he confessed, his voice barely audible. I put it in the drawer with the takeout menus. I thought, I will just leave it there. But then the mechanic called, and he said he was going to keep the truck if I didn't pay by Friday. I panicked. I thought, Hazel has good credit. Hazel won't miss it. I just needed to stop the bleeding. I listened to him, and for the first time, I understood the mechanics of their betrayal. It was not a grand conspiracy. It was a series of small, cowardly choices. It was the mail they didn't forward because it was too much effort. It was the signature they forged because it was the path of least resistance. They had stripped me for parts, not because they hated me, but because I was the nearest available resource. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said. I just didn't want to worry you. You didn't want to worry me? I asked, my voice rising. Dad, you committed a felony because you didn't want to have an awkward conversation. You valued your pride more than my safety. I am sorry, he said. We are all sorry. Just come back inside. We will figure out a payment plan. Just don't go to the police, please. I looked at the three of them. They were huddled together, united by their shared liability. They looked at me not as a daughter or a sister, but as a judge who held their fate in her hands. I am not coming back inside, I said, and I am not accepting a promise of a payment plan. I know how you pay things back. You pay them back with excuses. I reached into my bag and pulled out a notepad. I scribbled a name and a phone number on it. It was the number of the legal aid I had consulted. Here is how this works, I said, passing the paper through the crack in the window. You have two choices. Choice A. You go to the bank on Monday morning. You sit down with the manager. You sign an affidavit admitting that the debt belongs to you. You transfer the loans into your names. You assume full legal responsibility. And choice B? My sister asked, her voice trembling. Choice B is that I file the police report I have sitting on my laptop. I said, and then the state of Arizona and the state of New Jersey will decide what happens to you. My mother gasped. You wouldn't try me? I said, but we can't qualify for those loans on our own. My father protested. That is why we used your name. Then you sell the truck. I said, you sell the patio furniture. You sell whatever you have to sell to clear my name. That is not my problem anymore. I put the car in reverse. The backup lights illuminated their stunned faces. Hazel, wait, my mother cried. You are going to leave like this? After everything? What about us? What about the family? Are you just going to cut us off because we made a mistake? I stopped the car. I kept my foot on the brake. I looked at her one last time. I am not cutting you off. Mom, I said, I am willing to have a relationship with you. I am willing to answer your calls. I am willing to visit for holidays. Hope flared in her eyes. Really? She asked. Yes, I said, but only if that relationship is based on respect. I am done being the safety net. I am done being the resource you mine when you are desperate. If you want me in your life, you have to look me in the eye and see a person, not a bank account. I took a deep breath. The air in the car felt clean. And the first step to respect, I added, is cleaning up your own mess. You have until Monday at noon to send me proof that you have spoken to the bank. If I don't hear from you, I call the detective. Hazel. Goodbye. Mom. I lifted my foot off the brake and pressed the accelerator. I did not peel out. I did not speed. I drove away slowly, deliberately, navigating the rental car out of the lot and onto the main road. I watched them in the rearview mirror until they were just small, dark shapes under the orange glow of the streetlights. They were still standing there, arguing, pointing fingers at each other. For the first time in 32 years, I was not the one trying to fix it. I was not the glue holding the cracks together. I was the one who had walked away. I turned onto the highway that would take me back to the airport. The road ahead was dark, but the dashboard lights were bright and steady. I turned on the radio. Music filled the car, drowning out the phantom echoes of their pleading voices. I had lost $5,000. I had lost the illusion of a happy family. But as I merged onto the interstate, watching the miles tick up on the odometer, I realized I had gained something far more valuable. I had gained the ability to say no, and for the first time, I knew they could hear me. Monday arrived with the heavy, suffocating heat of a desert noon. I sat at my desk at Strata Solutions, my email inbox open, the clock in the corner of my screen ticking down the seconds. 11:58, 11:59. I had my finger poised over the send button on the email addressed to the fraud detective. I was not bluffing. I had spent the weekend drafting the affidavit, attaching every screenshot, every receipt, and every timeline entry. I was ready to burn the bridge, the foundation, and the ground it stood on, if that was what it took to clear my name. At 12 o'clock exactly, a new email popped into my inbox. The sender was my father. The subject line was blank. I opened it. There was no message in the body of the email. There were just 3 attachments. The first was a scanned document from the credit union. It was a formal acknowledgement of debt assumption. It stated that the loan previously listed under Hazel and Alan Gomez had been refinanced solely into the name of Alan Gomez. The interest rate was predatory, high enough to make me wince, but my name was gone. The second attachment was a receipt from the home improvement store. The credit card account had been closed. The balance had been paid in full. The third attachment was a photo. It was a picture of our driveway back home. My father's fishing boat, the one he had spent 10 years sanding and varnishing in the garage, was gone. In its place was an oil stain and empty space. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since I was 16. They had done it. They had not done it because they wanted to. They had done it because I had forced them to look at the edge of the cliff. My father had sold his pride and joy to save his reputation. It was a consequence, a real, tangible loss. I did not reply with thank you. I replied with 2 words: received, confirmed. I closed the fraud file on my computer. I did not delete it. I archived it. A compliance officer never destroys evidence. She just moves it to long-term storage. 3 days later, I scheduled a video call. I set the terms. It would be 30 minutes. No shouting, no crying, just business. When their faces appeared on my screen, they looked older. My father looked tired. The lines around his mouth etched deep. My mother looked small. My sister, Michelle, looked at the camera with a mix of defiance and shame. "We are clear," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "My credit is frozen. It will stay frozen. If any mail comes to that house with my name on it, you are to write 'Return to Sender' and put it back in the box. You do not open it. You do not hold it. We understand," my father said. His voice was gravelly. "We fixed it. Hazel, the boat is gone." "I know," I said, "and I appreciate that you did the right thing, even if you did it late. But we need to set a new baseline." I looked directly into the camera lens. "I am not your resource," I said. "I am your daughter. If you need money, you ask. And if I say no, the answer is no. You do not go behind my back. You do not use my name. If this happens again, even for a $5 subscription, I will not give you a weekend to fix it. I will file the report immediately. I promise," my mother said. She wiped her eyes. We got used to you being the one who fixes things. We forgot that you have your own life to fix." Then came the moment I did not expect. My father leaned closer to the screen. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I am sorry. Hazel," he said. "I waited for the but. I waited for, 'I am sorry you felt hurt,' or 'I am sorry we fought. I am sorry I stole from you,'" he said. "It was not borrowing. It was theft. And I am sorry I made you feel like you had to threaten to put me in jail just to get me to act like a father. You deserved better than that. The knot in my chest loosened. Just a fraction. It was not a magic cure. It did not erase the last 7 months. But it was the truth. And the truth was the only foundation we could build on. A week later, a package arrived at my apartment in Phoenix. I checked the return address. It was from my parents. I felt a spike of adrenaline, a reflex of suspicion. Was it a bill? Was it guilt mail? I opened the box. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a pair of high-end hiking socks and a Hydro Flask water bottle in my favorite shade of teal. There was a note. It was in my mother's handwriting. But it was not the usual rambling list of demands. For your hikes up Camelback Mountain. The note read, "We looked it up online. It looks steep. Please stay hydrated. We are proud of you." I stared at the note. Camelback Mountain. I had mentioned it once, months ago. In a conversation I thought they had ignored. They had listened, or maybe they had gone back and read the texts they had skipped. Either way, they had taken the time to learn the name of the mountain I climbed. I did not forgive them right then. Forgiveness is not a light switch you flip. It is a garden you have to water every day. And sometimes the soil is too rocky to grow anything for a long time. But I put the water bottle on my desk. It was a start. I went back to my life. I worked hard. I got promoted to lead auditor. I made new friends who knew me only as Hazel the Arizona native, not Hazel the escapee. 6 months later, I bought a house. It was a small mid-century modern place with a cactus garden in the front and a view of the sunset in the back. It was the first piece of property I had ever owned. I took a picture of the keys in my hand. I hesitated, then opened the family group chat. I bought a house. I typed, "Here are the keys." I braced myself for silence. I braced myself for a cat video. 30 seconds later, my phone pinged. "Congratulations." My sister wrote, "Does it have a guest room?" "Just kidding. Seriously, that is amazing. So proud of you." "Mija." My dad wrote, "Make sure you check the HVAC filters before you move in. The desert dust kills them. Send pictures of the kitchen." My mother added, "We are so happy for you." I looked at the screen. They were responding to me, not to the idea of me, but to the actual event happening in my life. The dynamic had shifted. I was no longer the background noise. I was the signal. The final test came on a Sunday evening. I was sitting on my new patio, watching the sky turn that impossible shade of bruised violet that only exists in the desert. My phone rang. It was my mother. I picked it up. "Hello?" "Hi, Hazel," she said. Her voice was clear. There was no TV blaring in the background. She was not doing dishes. "Hi, Mom," I said. "We were just sitting here," she said, "and we were wondering how are you?" I waited. I waited for her to ask about my job title, or my salary, or when I was visiting. "How are you really?" she asked again. "Are you happy out there?" The question hung in the air, simple and terrifying. She was asking about my internal state. She was asking to see me. I leaned back in my chair. I looked at the cactus garden I had planted myself. I looked at the life I had carved out of the red earth. "I am happy. Mom," I said. "I am really happy." I could hear her smile through the phone. "That is good," she said. "That is all we wanted to know. Tell us about it." And she waited. She did not interrupt. She just listened. I used to think that the tragedy of my life was that I was invisible. I spent years screaming, waving my arms, trying to reflect enough light to catch their eye. But as I sat there, telling my mother about the hummingbird that visited my feeder, I realized the truth was much simpler. I thought I was invisible. Turns out, I was just standing in the wrong place, in the lives of people who refused to look up. Now that I had moved, I could finally be seen. Thank you so much for listening to my story. This was a journey of finding a voice in a room that wanted silence. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening from a quiet room of your own? Or on a busy commute? Let me know in the comments below so we can share our thoughts together. Please remember to subscribe to the channel Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, And hit that hype button so this story can reach even more people who need to hear it. Stay strong and keep writing your own truth.